We are just over 7 months away from lights out for the 2027 season, and we need to discuss who will be on the grid next year, as there seems to be quite a few changes coming our way. But there's quite a few things to discuss before we can get to it. If you are new to this channel, please do leave this video a like and subscribe. That would be really helpful. If this is not your first video of mine, then I hope you enjoy. Let's get into it. Starting off, let's talk about the riders that are looking to stay with their current teams. Currently, there's only 3 riders signed onto the grid at the moment. The World Championship leader at the moment of recording this video, Marco Bezzecchi, and the 2 LCR Honda riders of Johann Zarco and Diogo Moreira. They are the only 3 riders confirmed for the lineup next year. However, you could also include Toprak Razgatlioglu, who is signed to Yamaha for next year, not specifically Pramac. So let's discuss the other riders that are looking to stay with their current team. And there's really only one rider that I can think of when it comes to this category, and that is Marc Marquez. As much as it's been rumoured that Marc will be dropping off the lineup this year, I really don't see it happening. He is still way too talented to be off the grid, and he's proven it recently this weekend at Balaton Park, where he took pole position, the sprint win, and the Grand Prix win. A fully fit Marc Marquez would be an unstoppable force. It's hard to imagine the grid without him, so I would still like to think that he would stay with Ducati. I believe that Toprak will be staying with Pramac, and obviously Bezzecchi will stay with Aprilia, and Zarco will stay with LCR. When it comes to Diogo Moreira, it's a little bit more complicated, but we'll get to that later in the video. Now we get on to the riders that are looking like they will retire at the end of this year. Currently, there's only 3 that seem almost confirmed that they'll be off the grid next year. Italian rider Franco Morbidelli, who has been underperforming consistently every single race. He did have the odd sprint podium at the Spanish Grand Prix, but who's really counting that because that sprint was crazy. Spanish rider Alex Rins is looking like he'll be off the grid next year. As hard as it is to say, because Rins has had such a strong career. Not like these other 2 riders haven't, but still. The third and final rider that I've got on my list of riders that might be off the grid next year, or more likely than not will be, is Jack Miller. As difficult it is for me to imagine, it might well be true. Miller has nowhere near been as quick as any other rider on the grid. Currently in the standings, he is 3rd last, only ahead of Vinales and Razgatlioglu. This is helped by his recent result at Balaton Park. Before that, he was behind both of them in the standings. Not to mention that Toprak is a rookie, and Maverick Vinales was injured for most of this season. So, unfortunately, as an Australian, it's hard for me to say, but Miller will probably be off the grid next year. Now we get on to riders that are staying on the grid, and the official transfers that I see happening. Let's start with Pedro Acosta. Acosta is rumoured to be going to Ducati Lenovo next year, and this is very likely to happen. He is not liking the environment at KTM at the moment, and the fact that all the KTM bikes seem to want to blow up all the time. So this means that he's going to be replacing somebody, and that obviously, as mentioned, Marquez will be staying at Ducati, so that means that Bagnaia will be out. Where will Bagnaia go though? Well, it seems more likely than not that Bagnaia will be heading off to Aprilia to partner Bezzecchi. Not a bad move for Pecco. However, this means that Martin will be out of Aprilia. So, where is Martin going? Well, Yamaha have a slot open now that Rins is out, so Martin will come in and fill that spot. But that also begs the question that who will be his teammate? Well, some might be quick to answer with Fabio Quartararo, but Quartararo is not enjoying that Yamaha at the moment and looks like he'll be on the way out. I see Martin's teammate being the Trackhouse rider Ayagura. This means that 2 Aprilia riders will be making the move over to Yamaha. So, yeah, where's Quartararo going? Well, I believe Quartararo will be heading off to the factory Honda team. I know, quite a shocking turn of events, but this seems like the most likely scenario. However, this means that we lose a Honda rider, and I think that will be Joan Mir. But do not fret, Mir fans, because he will be remaining on the grid. Who will he be replacing? Well, I could very much see that being Alex Marquez at Gresini, who really wants to go to a factory bike. So, luckily for him, there is one factory spot available, the one that Acosta has left at KTM. So, I see Alex Marquez going off to KTM. So obviously there's quite a few gaps in our little lineup here. So we need to get to the next section. Who will be filling one of the double gaps at VR46? Well, that seems like it's going to be Fermin Aldeguer. Now, obviously, I did say that Morbidelli would be on the way out. However, someone else that will be on the way out is Fabio Di Giannantonio. But he will not be out of MotoGP. Instead, he'll be making the move over to factory KTM next year. Yes, to partner Alex Marquez. Okay, so what about rookies? Well, as mentioned, there are 3 riders that I believe are on the way out. However, 6 rookies could be the possibility next year. We have got David Alonso, Nicolo Bulliger, Danny Holgado, Senna Agius, Izan Guevara, and Manu Gonzalez. We will save Alonso and Bulliger for later because I have stories for them myself. However, let's start with Danny Holgado, who I believe will be going into Gresini to replace Fermin Aldeguer. Great, we've now got a full Gresini lineup. What about the other rookie riders? Well, I believe Senna Agius is the next one that we should be talking about, and he will be going off to Tech 3 KTM. Agius has been performing extremely well in Moto2. He's currently 4th in the standings, and he's got 2 race wins in a row to his name this year. At, of course, the Grand Prix of the Americas and the Spanish Grand Prix. If that doesn't speak enough for you, he dominated the Australian Grand Prix last year and won the British Grand Prix pretty convincingly as well. When I say pretty convincingly, I mean overtake 2 riders at the final corner and win the race by 3/10. However, Gunther Steiner, Tech 3 KTM boss, did mention that he wants a rookie from Moto2, and Senna Agius seems to fill that category beautifully. MotoGP will be desperate to have an Australian rider on the grid, especially with Miller on the way out. So it seems very reasonable that you put Senna Agius in. Next, we've got Izan Guevara, one of the easiest moves for me, where I see him going to Pramac Yamaha. This means that he would partner Toprak and replace Jack Miller. Finally, Manu Gonzalez, who is an interesting story, but only recently has there been rumours swirling about him being in talks with Trackhouse. This means that Manu Gonzalez would replace Ayagura at Trackhouse. And the other Trackhouse seat, we of course have got to start with the whole Raul Fernandez rumours about him leaving Trackhouse. And I answer that with possibly. At the moment, his seat is under scrutiny from Enea Bastianini. So I feel like it's going to be between them. However, I could see them just doing a full seat swap. Bastianini will head off to Trackhouse next year, confirmed. However, this then leaves 2 other riders under scrutiny, but also leaves 1 other rider in question. What about that second Tech 3 seat? At the moment, that is filled by Maverick Vinales. Tech 3 have spoken very highly of Vinales. As well as this, Brad Binder is the other KTM rider that I could see taking this seat possibly. And then of course, you do have Raul Fernandez, who is now out of a seat thanks to Bastianini. However, even though I would love to say that Raul Fernandez will take that seat at Tech 3, I do believe that it will probably be Maverick Vinales. Go off at me in the comments about it, but it just seems the most logical. Tech 3 have got a very strong connection with Maverick Vinales, and it just feels like the best option for them. You keep that team dynamic up between Vinales and Tech 3, and as well as this, Maverick isn't doing terrible. Okay, he is doing terrible, but he has the experience to help develop their bike, and that's exactly what they're looking for. Brad Binder has that experience having been with KTM for years, however, only being with KTM does not really help. Not like KTM have got much to go off when it comes to developing a bike. Also, why would Binder go back on a team? He's been with factory KTM for 7 years. Why would he go to Tech 3? It just seems like taking a step back in your career. I could see Binder becoming a KTM test rider, especially with Danny Pedrosa on the way out of KTM, or at least on the development side, being a test rider. Binder, Polisbargo and Folger would be a great test lineup for KTM. And then what about Raul Fernandez? Well, I could see him possibly becoming an Aprilia test rider. Lorenzo Savadori is 33 years old. He's getting on a little bit. He's not doing a terrible job for Aprilia though. However, if Aprilia would like a wildcard rider, I don't see why they don't take Raul Fernandez. That, or maybe Fernandez would find a seat in Superbikes. It's hard to say. I do think Fernandez deserves to stay on the grid. I just feel like there won't be any seats left for him. Maybe he can return in a year's time. So, we've filled out that dilemma. Next thing on the agenda, Honda. Diogo Moreira obviously is signed on to LCR. However, he is also performing exceptionally well. At first, it looked like, according to rumours, David Alonso would join Fabio Quartararo at factory Honda. However, by Honda's standpoint, it makes more sense to sign Moreira. Moreira is performing so well, he's even beating the factory Honda riders on a regular basis. David Alonso's doing alright in Moto2, obviously had that incredible Moto3 season, which actually looks kind of normal now you compare it to like Max Keeler's this year. Though I see Moreira actually making the step up to factory Honda and Alonso going to LCR. This would be a shocking turn of events, but it would make a lot of sense. Finally, we get to that VR46 seat, one of the most highly contested seats on the grid. A Ducati seat, one that if you jumped into, you would get probably consistent top 10s at least. Points most weekends would be on the board for you because it's a Ducati seat. However, it is hard to predict the next season because next season, of course, has the new regulations coming in. 850cc engines and, of course, Pirelli tyres will shake up the entire grid. Now, there was originally 4 riders on the table for this seat. That was Franco Morbidelli, Luca Marini, Nicolo Bulliger, and Celestino Vietti. Morbidelli most likely will not get it. He would be the worst choice for them. He's stayed with them for 2 years and has consistently underperformed. Not just that, he underperformed when he raced on the Yamaha and when he was on the Pramac Ducati. He was a very strong rider years ago and even fought for the championship. However, that was old Morbidelli. New Morbidelli finishes 20 seconds behind his teammate consistently every weekend and takes out other riders on the grid. It makes me sound like such a Morbidelli hater, but I think most MotoGP fans are now. Okay, we're down to 3. Vietti, Bulliger, and Marini. However, I think Celestino Vietti dropped off their radar after he crashed out of qualifying at Mugello. He's not doing too bad. In fact, he is 3rd in the Moto2 standings, and even at Mugello made an incredible comeback to finish the race in 2nd. However, I think VR46 and Valentino Rossi specifically have seen that Vietti makes mistakes when he shouldn't be. He's been in Moto2 for multiple years, and way too many for a rider who's ready to make the step up for MotoGP. As much as it's kind of hard to say, Vietti may not ever get a MotoGP seat. And that is just the sad truth. If he doesn't get a seat next year, he never will. And will most likely end up like someone like Joe Roberts, Aaron Canet, Jake Dixon, Simone Corsi, riders that were stuck in the lower class, not because of their skill, but just because there was no spots available. Okay, Bulliger versus Marini. This one's hard. Luca Marini has been a strong development rider for Honda over the last couple of years and has managed to consistently finish in the top 10 on most occasions, though he has been probably the 3rd fastest Honda consistently this year. Earlier this year, you could argue it was Zarco and Mir faster than him. Currently, I would say Moreira and Mir are quicker than him. The only difference is Mir can't stay on the bike. Moreira also has the troubles of being on a satellite machine. Zarco just isn't racing right now for obvious reasons. Marini would not be a terrible choice. Plus, he's also Valentino Rossi's half-brother. However, they are going into a new era next year, that being with Pirelli tyres. One rider has been able to run the Pirelli tyres brilliantly in World Superbikes over any other rider, and that is Nicolo Bulliger, who is exactly who I'm going for to be on the VR46 lineup next year. Now, if I made this video a couple weeks ago, I would have actually changed my mind and said Luca Marini. However, a lot more rumours seem to be linking up to Nicolo Bulliger as of recent. And this isn't opinion-based, this is all on rumours. So as much as I'd like to say that Marini will stay on the grid or Vietti will make the jump to the Premier class, I just can't see it happening. Bulliger seems the most likely to be jumping on and the most confident with the Pirelli tyres. I could see Luca replacing Michele Pirro as Ducati's test rider and instead becoming Ducati's primary test rider. Pirro, of course, is now in his 40s and will no longer be able to ride for much longer. There's only so many races that you can do when you're that old. Not that 40 is that old, but for MotoGP standards, it definitely is. So what do you think of my final lineup? Let me know down in the comments. Be sure to leave this video a like and once again subscribe down below if you're brand new. I love making videos on this, querying about current rumours circling around the paddock. If you have any suggestions for another video that I should do in the future, let me know down in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you later. Goodbye.